I'm really excited to be hosting this panel with these incredible, passionate leaders who have very different points of view and different programs on volunteering. So hoping that we get many different perspectives, maybe some debate. Let's see. That would be fun. I'm Sona Kosa. I'm Chief Impact Officer at Benevity. I sit in the same role that many of you do, leading ESG, DEI, social impact, values and ethics and climate for Benevity, but also lead our social innovation lab, which is called Benevity Impact Labs, where we do a lot of data and research to help catalyze more impact and inclusion, really offering that as almost like a data for good type of initiative. So here today we've got some fantastic panelists. We're starting with Carly here from Allstate. I'm just trying to find my notes really quick. Here we go, Carly. So she is the Manager of Leadership Activation and Nonprofit Capacity Building with the Allstate Foundation, dedicated to building the capacity of nonprofit organizations and redefining how corporations equip and empower their leaders and employees to advance social impact. So welcome, Carly. We've also got Pritha Mittal, who's the Regional Head of the Macquarie Group Foundation for the Americas. So Pritha oversees Macquarie's social impact in the Americas, which includes their philanthropic their philanthropic grant portfolio and employee engagement activities, racial equity fund, as well as impact investing, shared value, and crisis response. So you're a little busy. And then we've got Kim Rice, who is the Community Engagement Manager at Exelon Corporation, and Exelon's a sponsor of this event. And Kim brings nearly 20 years of experience working with and within Chicago's nonprofit community, and also has a lot of great tips on Chicago. Awesome. So we're going to start today. We're going to have a little bit of a panel discussion. We'd love to leave time for some rich Q&A. And ideally, we also have time for some small table breakouts. So I know we're running a bit late, but we'll try and make this very jam-packed. So I just wanted to start with a few overall trends that we've seen on the Benevity platform from a volunteering perspective. Just, exponential growth over the past few years. Every chart is up and to the right. And really what we're seeing is that volunteering is superseding what it looked like before the pandemic, which I think is great news. So employees contributed more than 20 million volunteering hours. That's 41% growth year over year. We saw 12% growth in the number of active volunteers, as well as many more companies actually investing in volunteering. So that was up 7 points year over year. And really, this growth has been driven by many companies using volunteering as a way to drive more purpose in their culture and in their employee connections, using it to bring people back to the office in a more meaningful way, or to connect with their communities. But we'll start to see that some of that trend is shifting a little bit later in today's conversation. So I do want to, this is, by the way, data from Benevity's most recent State of Corporate Volunteering report. I'll flash up a QR code at the end of our session if you're interested in checking out. Lots of data, lots of benchmarking, which I'll be sharing a little bit of today. But I really want to talk to Kim about one of the trends that we saw in our report that actually you really have been leading on, I would say, is we've seen this really incredible growth in the number of companies who are using what we call volunteer acts of kindness, which are actions that are not in service directly to a nonprofit, but are really promoting pro-social action. And here's the other stat, but we're really going to focus on the fact that volunteer acts of kindness are used by over 80% of companies, and 1/3 of volunteers only participate in those kinds of acts of kindness. So I wanted just to turn it over to Kim to talk a little bit about how you've seen this happen at Exelon.
Yeah, absolutely. Can everyone hear me? Is my mic? It is, okay. So one of the things that we started a few years ago, really coming out of the pandemic, and I have to give kudos to our former colleagues at Constellation. We used to be one company, we split. They actually started it before we did in their business unit, and we adopted it because it was so successful. We call it Valentine's for the community. So we take the month of February and we dedicate it to encouraging employees to go out and do something kind. And we've learned we need to set a few guidelines, but really it's encouraging folks to do something. And we've partnered, or we leverage the site Kudo Board. If you're not familiar with it, it's an online platform where people can just share like we use it for birthdays, you send a link and everyone can write something fun on it. And we started using it for Valentine's for the community. So what we do is we do a lot of outreach, and I can answer questions about that, but we encourage employees to do something good and then come to Kudo Board and post about it. And we encourage folks to put like little images with it. Some of them you can see up here don't. But, and then for every kindness post that they put on Kudo Board, we ask them then to also log into our platform called Powering Communities. Sorry, we're on Cybergrants. But we can talk. And then they can earn 1 hour of volunteer time for each act of kindness that they post, up to 10 for the month of February. And we have the event listed on Valentine's Day. So if I post something on Kudo Board on February 2nd, I go to the February 14th date on our Powering Communities site and log an hour with that event. We can do that up to 10 times. And at our company, once you reach, for every 10 hours up to 30, you earn a Dollars for Doers reward of $250 that can go to any eligible organization of your choice. So what we found is that employees who might not regularly or before, think of signing on to volunteer events or what have you, this is a really easy entry point for them. And what's nice is that we can put it on QR codes and get it out. We're a company that's made of, half of us are desk-based and half of us are deskless. We're a utility company, so we've got half of our employees are out in the field, up poles and underground vaults, hauling equipment, fixing equipment, answering storm response. So we needed something that was really easy to get to, and also, quite frankly, something it's not really tied to the company site, and some people are apprehensive about doing things related to the company on their personal devices. So some of the feedback we heard is that this is great because some of them don't even take the second step of logging their time on Powering Communities. That's one of the areas we want to improve upon. But it's been really fun. And we love reading through it. And we started it in 2022, and we had about 600 posts. In 2023, we had over 800. And this year, 2024, we hit exactly 1,000 posts. But I have to admit, a couple of them came right after midnight because there was a gala that night and people gave, and not saying I was one of them, but I'm not sure if mine got to count, like where that threshold is. But we did hit 1,000, and it's really great. One of the things that's a lessons learned from it, I have to say, is some of these are kind of funny. It was like, I called my mom. I'm like, well, you should call your mom. Does that earn an hour of volunteer time? Or I bought my son a gym membership, and there was a lot of debate, and was it an adult son? Was it a child son? When does it count as kindness, and when is it obligation, right? So there's definitely some interesting things there as we scroll through them, but it's been really, really useful for us. I'll also add that we do an autumn acts of kindness as well, and fully transparent. That one hasn't been as successful as our Valentine's for the community, and we think it's just due to timing. There's a lot that happens in the fall, right? And there's lots of different requests that employees are getting to do over that season. So we're reevaluating the timing on that, but Valentine's seems to feel really, really good. It also happens to align with Girl Scout cookie season. So, lots of people use, I bought a bunch of Girl Scout cookies and gave them away or whatever. So we see a lot of nice alignment there. So yes, I'll pause on that.
Thank you, Kim.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it because I think this is a contentious issue that comes up with some companies who are like, well, it's not auditable, it won't pass the audit and all that kind of stuff, but they really are powerful drivers for engagement, especially for Gen Z, who, kind of think they're much more socially minded, they're much more about taking action as opposed to very traditional ways of giving back.
Absolutely.
I want to shift the conversation a little bit. I alluded to this earlier, which is we're seeing companies start to really think about how to evolve their programs. Now that we're coming out of this period of kind of return to office, we're moving more into kind of mandates for some companies or settling really into remote. And so what we're seeing is that, there's really a split in focus in terms of how companies use volunteering. Is it for that employee connection and culture? or is it really actually to drive social impact? And so I just wanted to invite Pritha, you to talk a little bit about like, how are you thinking about the shift after coming out of COVID and the pandemic and into this hybrid world? Like, how are you thinking about evolving your
Happy to. So at Macquarie, everything's driven by our people, all of our foundation work, all of our social impact. We start with our people. So that's at the core of what we do. But then there is this engagement piece. So social impact is incredibly important and our focus. But how do we engage our people? And as you'll hear more later, it is a big question we get from senior leadership. They want to know, are people getting involved? What are they doing? Are they out in the community? So we drive several different programs that are very strategic, tied to our grant partners, where we engage our people and we get a lot of uptake. And it really suits the staff who maybe don't know what to do, don't know how to get involved, or maybe want to be involved with the company. Or like, oh, it's a big Macquarie thing, I can tell my manager, whatever their motivation might be. We also provide a significant amount of other supports to kind of get at what you were talking about, like what do our people actually care about personally? Nothing to do with Macquarie. So we have quite a robust matching policy, donation for doers, days off, probably a lot of the things many of you have, in order to meet our people wherever they might want to engage with the community. When it comes to the actual programming, the thing we've seen post-COVID, or even post-COVID, I would say now, I like to think it's in the past, where there's hybrid. We're an office that's in the office 3 to 4 days a week. It varies a little bit depending on your job, but we don't generally have people that are fully remote. So there is an expectation to be in. And whereas when we were just coming out of COVID, like many of you were doing hybrid events, and we all learned how to do it, we've learned to navigate Zoom, how to make it equitable. But what we're seeing now is really we offer it either in person or remote. We no longer are trying to do hybrid programming because we found that it actually doesn't work great for our people and the experience is very different. We've also actually found that it can be hard for us to deliver in a way that's really impactful. And I think folks actually like, oh, we're all on a Zoom together. Like, we know how to do Zooms, or I'm in a room with you. I can have that level of interaction. So there's an equitable piece, but it's also just actually the experience itself being much stronger. And we kind of took a moment, I would say September to October, to actually evaluate all of our programming and look at what was working and what wasn't. And that's kind of where we landed. We did some surveys, which I'm sure many of you have done before. You get bits and pieces of information, but then we really just kind of like took a minute and thought for ourselves, like what actually felt good. And I'm sure many of you have been in a meeting where you're on the Zoom and everyone else is in person, and you miss out on half of what's going on. So in the same way, if you're volunteering or trying to engage with the rest of the business, it's really hard when you're in that mixed environment. So that's kind of our biggest takeaway, I would say, in terms of how we're looking at our staff engagement. The other thing we're seeing is a huge uptick in requests that isn't really our bread and butter at all and will not be around team volunteering. So again, we are driven by our people and we encourage team volunteering and team fundraising, and our staff does a bang-up job with it to the point where they're always asking for these large matching requests, which we honor, which is a separate issue we always have to deal with. But we're now asking, can we provide the opportunities, which I'm sure many of you can understand. It's really hard to find just the right volunteer opportunity for those 17 people that are free in New York City and want to deliver food in the Bronx from 4 to 6, and they don't, they're like, I don't even know. Like, you want to come cook dinner for my family? I don't know. So we get those asks every now and again. We're colleagues. We try to figure it out, but we've actually reached the point where we actually can't. Like, go to New York Cares, go to these 1 or 2 orgs we know, talk to our partners, but we can't take that on. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think we want to. And we are actually, as I shared with this group when we were talking, looking at actually a couple of the platforms that you're probably familiar with that do this and make it more of a self-serve option. So we're looking to pilot that this year and kind of see the business uptake. One thing you mentioned that we're seeing a huge uptake is our junior staff. They want to volunteer all the time. They still want to go out for drinks, but after volunteering. And it's more about like, let's go volunteer together. Let's get to know each other. Let me find out something funny about you that I would never find out over a drink unless it's too late and it's probably not appropriate. So, we're really seeing that shift. And then, I think the other upside that's happening as a product is just the culture. People are feeling good about it when they volunteer together. They share an experience, and then they come to work the next day and they're like, oh, remember we were talking about our dog? Like that was, do you want to walk our dogs? Or whatever it might be. And it's just really building that culture. And we stay in our lane a little bit on culture because we have a whole bunch of people that are very focused on that. But the foundation, as I'm sure you can all attest to, is a huge part of our culture. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. I don't know if there are other things you want me to touch on, but that's kind of in a nutshell.
No, I think that's great. And I mean, there's just neuroscientific research on the team bonding, right? Because oxytocin gets released when you volunteer. And so when you're doing it together, you're bonding. So it's proven.
Yeah.
The culture people can't deny that. But you touched on team volunteering and kind of, building those social bonds. I wanted to turn over to Carly, who has a complete counterpoint on this. So let's talk to Carly about how Allstate Foundation does it.
Yes, of course. And I think we can all agree. It's so challenging. So challenging. It's great. There's good intentions behind. We want to volunteer as a team. But those requests of, we have an hour on site in this location, we'd like to focus on this issue area, it's not in service of our nonprofit partners. It's oftentimes, it's almost more harmful to their staff than it is beneficial, depending on what the situation is. And so what we're working on is education. We say, that's great, you want to volunteer. If you only have 1 hour on site for this specific period with this specific group, 50 people, maybe what you're looking for is a team building event. Yeah. Maybe it's not volunteering. But if you really want to advance social impact, here's how you can do it. Or we can come talk about our social issues and we can dig into an issue area that aligns with our foundation and your team is passionate about, and then we can have a conversation on what does flash consulting for nonprofits look like? How do you do your job differently because of that? Like one example is our customer experience team is phenomenal. They're so dedicated to making sure that Allstate customers have a phenomenal experience at every point in the process. And they're also really passionate about our issue areas. And so we took that opportunity to bring them in, several of them already were, but educate them on one of our issue areas, disrupting the cycle of relationship abuse, and have a conversation amongst their team of like, what are things we can do differently to improve the customer experience of those who may be impacted by this issue area. Maybe they're in a situation right now where they're experiencing financial abuse. Maybe they recently left a harmful relationship. And what they did was they went back to their customer data, feedback that customers willingly provide us on their experience. They did a quick search, and unfortunately, they didn't have to look far to see customers openly telling us that they were facing these issues and how it interacted with their customer experience. Luckily, a lot of them were great. They said, my agent really understood where I was coming from. He helped me get on a new policy. And just talking about how wonderful that experience was. And so they looked at things like those and said, okay, how can we train more people on how to understand this issue area, how to provide that excellent customer experience? And they also found some that were maybe not as great. It's a really challenging issue. You face a lot of different things. Switching a policy, if anyone's done it for insurance, it's not always as easy as we'd like it to be. And so they looked at ways they could improve the training experience for that. And so that's where we push back a lot of times. Like I said, we say, do you really want to do volunteerism? Do you want to advance social impact? Here's some ways you can do it. You're probably going to need to set aside a little bit more time. We'll work with you on that. But if really these are your parameters, like perhaps go out and enjoy one of the cultural institutions we partner with. Like we can get you free passes. Go to the art museum. Get to learn about a cultural institution the city you're in. But let's not, do kit packing for the sake of kit packing.
I love that. And it's so powerful to hear how the education actually lifts the entire business, really, and the customer experience, especially at a time that would really matter to those folks. Yeah. I think you were also saying, Carly, that has a kind of generational aspect. Can you just talk a bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So another thing that we do is both look at, we call it our role of business in society. So those are the pieces of how is understanding an issue area connected to the work. And that's something that, I really find that once people are involved in it, it's important across all generations. Like once it clicks, I will say with our earlier career employees, they often get it a lot faster. We spend less time in the presentations kind of explaining how these connect. And it's just kind of innate to what they're wanting to do in their roles. Of course, not across the board, but we're finding more and more that Gen Z people are looking for ways that how can not only I go out and volunteer, but how can I do my job in a way that I feel good about every single day. We also do flash consulting, and that's something where we get a lot of interest from Gen Z volunteers, and that's a pro bono program we run. We run both long-term and short-term volunteer programs that are skills-based. We work with our partner Common Impact to do that. But the flash consulting events where I often hear from employees, and this is kind of just also generational a little bit, but I think a lot of employees regardless say, and nonprofits, can you really have an impact in a 6-hour flash consulting event? I will admit, before we started doing them, I also had that. I wondered, is this the next generation of kit packing where it's more for us to feel good than it is to drive impact? And so we tried it out. We were cautious, approached it. I have been so impressed with the results. We had an employee share, he said, in the amount of time it could take me to pick up litter, I can build out a three-year strategy for this nonprofit's website. Yeah. And so they're heavily scoped projects. That's why I personally feel like we've scoped internally, we've worked with partners, working with a partner who really understands how can you meet the nonprofit's actual needs, so not us coming and saying we want to improve your website, but listening to the nonprofit and saying, what do you need? Here's what our skill sets are. And then having a project that can actually be completed in that time frame, it requires understanding, awareness of the nonprofit sector to heavily scope that. But then when you're able to match these teams up, it is really phenomenal, the amount of work that they can get done in a 6-hour event. I think we just had one in April, and 100% of nonprofits said we successfully addressed the challenge they face, and 95% said it actually made a real meaningful difference for their organization. And then our employee side, we are seeing that, we go back to, we're not doing engagement for the sake of engagement. We're seeing that as a benefit. We're focusing on the social impact. And we saw 95% of our employees are more likely to recommend us as a great place to work after participating. So we're seeing the benefits on both sides.
I love that. And honestly, constraint is so useful in driving momentum, right? Like if you have endless hours, who knows what you're doing wasting it, right?
Absolutely.
So I wanted to talk about measurement. So participation rate, of course, is one of the big measures that people use in terms of volunteering. And I'm just flashing this up again. This is from the State of Corporate Purpose. Just for those of you who are interested in looking at the breakdown by different countries and different industries, I mean, I think there is very much a cultural element to this. Sometimes people are surprised to see European and APAC countries hitting the top, but really it's embedded into the culture, into the DNA. It's kind of an expected form of giving back in some of those countries. And then we see really strong participation rates in industries like yours, Kim, where they have long-standing traditions and a really high awareness. But I wanted to turn it over to each of you and just ask, how do you measure the success of your programs?
Sure, I'll start off. I absolutely love what Carly and team and Pritha's team are doing, especially around the social impact of their volunteering. And we have long-term and short-term as well, but I think as an industry, we're an energy, we're a utility, I should say, we're a utility company. So for us, it still is about culture and engagement and bringing our employees back together, especially post-COVID, where we do have this bit of a divide between field employees and desk employees. So our work really does focus on still the engagement piece. For measurement for us, it really is still in terms of the basics, right? Like how many employees, how many hours, how many events independent hours, how many events company sponsored. We also look at management and union engagement to see where we've been doing a lot of work last year and this year. Our focus is specifically on engaging with those employees who don't have easy access to awareness of our programs, because many of them don't even have email addresses. So when you think about how do you get to people who you can't even get to in the standard way, we have to put a heavy focus on that. So we are doing that. And I think eventually once we get, and our numbers, we feel like our numbers are great. We're at 35% of our employees participating. We had 1,000 more people log volunteer hours last year compared to this year. I can't say they were all kudo board people, but maybe. And so that's really still our standard of measurement, is focusing on that engagement and trying to bring people together at this point. And with our longer term programs, like we have some scholarship and STEM programs where we have employees who, stay with the same group of students over the course of a couple years. We do get to measure that with them, and like how do they stick with it? Are they staying with us for the long term over the several years of the program? So that's another one, tenacity of our volunteer base.
I guess I'll go. I sat in the right seat. I think. 'Cause I'm somewhere between both of them in terms of driving social impact, but through our people. So to respond kind of this, it's funny what you said because, so we're an Australian-based company, but I'll speak for the Americas. So our global, we still use participation rate as one of our major metrics that we report on. I will say one of the things we are trying to sort of decipher out is that skilled volunteering piece. As I'm sure many of you are familiar, there's more of like a tangible, what is that impact that comes with it? But we're still kind of sorting that out, like what skilled volunteering means globally, which I think has been a trick we haven't quite figured out yet. So our participation rate globally is actually around 30%, but here in the Americas and actually in the UK, it's closer to 50, which is kind of our global goal. So we're doing really well here. So I'm really excited, and I'm pushing my team to make it higher. But it's actually funny because Australia and Asia are kind of the ones bringing us down right now. We're working on that. And I guess the only other thing I would say is, in addition to participation, one of the key things we have with all of our, like globally, we have overall metrics of what we're trying to drive towards with our grant partners. But a part of that is having staff engage with each of our grant partners. So not just a staff champion, someone on the board, and a senior leader. So we're very focused on making sure that when and if we are no longer funding a partner, we kind of leave behind Macquarie. And so you still have Macquarie behind your back. And in addition to that, part of, the dollars are the dollars. They are what they are, and that's a set number. But thinking about what are all the non-financials that Macquarie can bring to the table. And I think that's a key element of what we try to do. I mean, I think about it, just dealing with this yesterday. Our team was dealing with, we're about to move offices, and we have like 7,000 laptops or something. What do you do with them, right? And so it's like, how do we get them to someone that could use them versus, okay, they're going to be e-recycled, and we'll pay some money, and they'll go away, never to be seen again. So we do try to think creatively about how to bring the best of Macquarie and all of Macquarie to the table in addition to whatever those dollars are.
There's got to be an opportunity to do a photography session with those laptops.
Oh, we do. We do. I have lots of strange pictures on my phone with laptops and desk chairs and things.
Yeah, this one's super interesting. So I actually used to lead the team, the giving and volunteering team back in, I think, like 2019, 2020, and our goal was 100% volunteering, not set by me, as you can all imagine. And so, when that's your goal, you design around that, and you find meaningful ways to connect it to the company culture and the social impact. It just so happened that the pandemic happened at the same time we were revisiting our 5-year strategic plan. And we were looking at all our social impact areas and saying, okay, are we looking for raising awareness of these issues? Are we looking to reach the most people? Or are we truly looking to drive specific outcomes? And so the silver lining of that timing was the way that we were trying to reach that 100% employee giving and volunteering wasn't feasible anymore within the pandemic. And Allstate has actually resisted return to work mandates and is really embracing like the future of workplace and hybrid work. We're almost 55,000 employees, 83% fully home-based, 16% hybrid, 1% in office. And so we are very much, in my opinion, looking at designing for remote opportunities. My team, for example, is dispersed across the entire country. So we couldn't do it the same way, and at the same time, we were looking at how can we advance social impact. We were very fortunate. We had fantastic buy-in from our senior leadership on focusing on social impact. There was a lot of conversations, looking at logic models, and really aligning on that. I will say we still have the conversation, though, of we present our metrics based on how are these activities advancing our outcomes. And so we tie it to what was accomplished for the nonprofit partners. We do immediate surveys, we do 3-month surveys. We really look at what is the value added, how are we increasing capacity, and we lead with those. Do we still get questions of how many people are engaging and how can we get more? Absolutely, absolutely. That's something we're constantly answering and trying to just direct back to, remember, we're focusing on social impact, and here's all these positive metrics that come out of it that are related to engagement. It's just not the same as leading with engagement. So we've resisted to openly, or I would say like putting the engagement numbers at the top, but we do share things like 90% of people who have participated in our flash consulting, which last year was 600, 90% formed a new relationship within the company that will help them solve a future business problem. So we're showing that engagement, that value to our culture, that value to our business, but leading with the social impact and always bringing it back to that.
Yeah, I love that. That's something we've been talking a lot about at Benevity, is just thinking about, we all report on inputs and engagement, but how do we actually bring in the element of outcomes both on the social and the business front? And one of the things we've actually just launched is an employee volunteering impact report, which actually takes all of your hours and maps them to specific social outcomes based on the programs that your volunteers are supporting. So and trying to scale that, right? Because it's also very manual for you, very manual for the nonprofits. And so one of the things is, how do we make that easier for the nonprofits? So I love seeing that evolution, but it is an and, right?
Yeah.
It's really an and, because it's doing multiple things. So I'm just going to do a quick lightning round, and then we'll go to a Q&A. I'd love to hear from each of you, and maybe Pritha, we'll start with you, which is like, from your perch, what is the future of volunteering for, say, the next 1 to 2 years? Like, what are you seeing on the horizon?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, when it comes to volunteering and social impact in general, one of the things that we're looking at is how do we actually work with the business more directly? So driving social impact through the business. So it's not a profit and, oh, by the way, we had some nice social impact, but it's like, let's do it together. And so that's been something we've embarked on over the past, I'd call it 2.5, 3 years. And seeing some really good uptake actually globally, which is really exciting. And one thing that I think someone touched on, I apologize, I don't know who, it also, again, somehow it goes back to like our junior staff, like it really engages them to have some purpose. You know, we're a global bank, so sitting at your desk doing Excel all day and then being like, oh, wait a second, I can also do some workforce development and get all these farmers in, you know, Latin America engaged in how to produce soybean in a legal way. That's amazing. I want to do that in addition to the model that I have to make off the side of my desk. So that's something we're starting to see more and more of how to bring staff engagement into the business, but with that social impact purpose, with business profit, naturally.
Absolutely. I'll jump off of that. Similarly, so we're actually in the middle of putting together a community program engagement survey for our employees this fall, and working with our org effectiveness team, you know, working with a behavior psychiatrist who's doing the survey development. And he says, you know, we were talking about whether or not we look at tenure, right, with employees or generation. And he said, well, what I can tell you, just from what I know already, is that, you know, the newer, younger generations that are coming into the business expect it. And they don't even look at companies unless it aligns with their social values. So it's an integral part. We are all seeing it with the increased requests that our teams are getting to engage in that way, and the reporting that comes from that. We're launching, last year we launched a Power BI for executives to be able to see their employee engagement is updated weekly, so they know exactly what percentage of their employees take part of our 4 key programs, including volunteerism and Dollars for Doers. And later this month, what month is it? No, so I guess next month now, we're going to be launching an all-company Power BI, so employees can go and see kind of where they sit in relation to how other teams are doing. Yeah, really smart folks working on making this happen. So we just only see, you know, for us, it's, again, back to that engagement. We're just trying to get more and more people engaged, and it fits under our employee engagement piece, and local vitality is a part of what our main pillars are. So, you know, one could debate whether, you know, the Bulldog Rescue helps local vitality, but we have lots of people who swear it does. So, you know, we'll continue to support folks who want to do that. So, yeah, I just think more positive, more engagement from, and I think that those people help influence the generations that are still in the workforce above, where maybe they didn't think it was as much of a value add as what it really is. And we do hear that from more senior members of our teams, like, okay, we made the time, and yeah, it was actually really great. So.
I love that, and like data-driven volunteering. I mean, giving them the power, that's really incredible.
And it comes with phone calls, though. Or I should say Teams messages, yes. Right? Can we talk? Hello. How are you? Oh, boy.
I know that world well. So from my point of view, I have 2 colleagues that are working on the future of the Allstate Foundation's stakeholder activation. So how do we engage a variety of stakeholders in our issue areas? Once again, that pivot from not just awareness, but actually asking consumers to engage with us on these issue areas. And I think what is really smart about their approach, and what I'm most excited about to see how it comes together, is engaging employees to engage customers and consumers. I mean, we have 55,000 employees. The amount of people in their own networks, that's a lot of consumers if we can educate our employees on these issue areas. And one example of a campaign they did last year is one of our partners is Donors Choose, who supports teachers with projects in the classroom. And in the past year, they would give out $50 Donors Choose gift cards to engage our employees. They could give to a project in their local community or at a school they knew. And then last year, what they did was they said, okay, we will give you a $50 gift card, and we're giving you one to share with your home team. So whether that's somebody in your family, somebody in your neighborhood, a local school, so they got a $50 gift card and they got to give one, kind of like a give one, get one.
Wow.
And it was a way of empowering our employees to talk about this issue area that's so important to us as a company, and then engaging somebody in their life to do it.
I love that. That's the power of kind of amplifying the social brand
Yeah.
that you have, which of course is attracting talent, as many of you are saying. Well, thank you for those perspectives. I'll just flash this up. Oh, wait. Yeah, we're going to go into small table discussion, but before we do that, we'd love to just have an open Q&A. So any questions? Yeah.
I have a question for Carly. How do you do the discussions, the area discussions, issue area discussions?
How do we do the issue area discussions with the different business area groups?
Yes.
We bring in our program officers, so I am not the person leading those. Our program officers, employees of the foundation, deep expertise in those issue areas, and we bring in our nonprofit partners. We love elevating the voices of our partners, bringing them into the conversation, having them talk about this issue area. For youth empowerment, that's bringing in, we support youth-led, youth-driven service. We bring in young change makers, talk about the work they're doing in the community. For workforce, we're bringing in our job prep partners or people who are working on inclusive hiring. So I'd say as much as you can, elevating, bringing in your partners' voices. And then we tie it to real business data. So that is what I found has been the key, especially with our senior leaders. We just did this at our executive conference last year with 200 of our executives. We had a conversation with the domestic violence hotline, and then we brought in those the customer feedback. So we had real customer quotes on the screen, so they didn't just have to believe us that these issues are affecting our customers. Here's the large data point. Here's an example of how it's directly impacting our business.
So, but how many of these do the program officers do?
How many? That's a good question. So we've been focusing on kind of like, we started with our executives, then we went to all of our directors. I would say so far this year, maybe we've done like 15 to 20, trying to get to these larger groups. We also have, our communications team is great, and they design these like communications decks by like overall that then can be tailored to department. So it's working with the communicators to build these into these templates that then get shared out across the enterprise. Still a work in progress. And then we partner with our EIGs as well. We just had a startup challenge where employees were doing a hackathon on real business issues, and we made sure that this issue area was one that they could pick to focus on. So kind of finding all those different avenues that employees are going to, bringing in the business data, and then elevating our partners' voices.
I'm wondering how you all are kind of tying this work, the volunteer work, into the other goals of the company. So the kind of the non-social impact goals. Are you looking at performance reviews, or are you looking at surveys and say, okay, these people are engaged, especially you, Kim, as you talked about, like when you're looking at departments and the percentages. Yeah. Is there discussion then on that, and finding leaders and within there? How do you tie it all to those types of business goals?
Yeah, I'll jump in for a second. It's a great question and something that we're just really working on this year. So we do a biennial or every other year survey, employee engagement survey that looks at, the state of the company. And so that has, 80 questions. Everybody's called in out of the field. There's a huge push to make sure that every person has the opportunity to take this survey. We were supposed to do one this spring, and we've been working with our org effectiveness team we provided all the data that showed participation across all of our 4 programs last year, and they were going to line up the results from this year's employee engagement survey against performance from 2023 so that we could show in a very clear way the thing that we like to show, or we suspect we'll be able to show, right? We all anecdotally believe, and maybe there's been surveys at other companies from people in the room, I'd love to hear about it, that those who respond higher across all of the metrics in an employee engagement survey also are the people who are engaged in the community. I'd love if folks could share that. For a variety of reasons, we're postponing the full employee engagement survey until next year, so we're still going to do that. In lieu of that, and actually it was going to be an add-on anyway, we're going to go ahead and send surveys out this fall that just focus specifically on our programs. But you know, all of the evidence is there. There's lots of stories written about how there's that correlation there. Now it's just a matter of actually being able to show it to our communities. And I will say that our chief sustainability officer and talent development officer, they are really engaged in this work. They want these questions answered for us too, because they want to be able to show it across our C-suite. But we're fortunate we do have a lot of members of the choir in our E-suites, our C-suite. So. Yeah.
I would just add, we partner really closely with our HR and talent team, like very, very closely. So in addition to some of the work you were talking about skilled volunteering, like that's also an opportunity for our junior staff particularly to take on more leadership roles. They might not be people managers, but if they're now in like a consulting group and they're providing advisory to a nonprofit, all of a sudden you have, you know, a junior person who's all of a sudden leading a team. And so we very much make sure that that gets circulated to their managers, and we have a whole process in place where we recognize our community champions, champion or not even champion, but any work they're doing to make sure that managers understand this is in addition to their day job. They're taking the time, it's important to them. And oh, by the way, it's a skill they're developing that is transferable in the business that you'll later on see as they look to get promoted, et cetera. So we have worked very, very closely with our HR and talent team, and I think what we're seeing more and more, those partners, our internal partners, are coming us to ask for opportunities as well. Like, oh, are you doing that pro bono program again? And we're like, yeah. And they're like, can you see if this person might be interested, or can we make sure they're on the list? And we actually reach out to staff for some of our strategic program, and we work with HR to say, can you send us a list of people you think that would be eligible, who are maybe looking for a reach or a stretch in their current role that you can't currently offer? So that is actually, I mean, it's not core of what we do, but it is something that has become very important to the broader company for us to engage with.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you. Heather Nestle with New York Life. So just to build on the skills-based conversation, so we've had good experience with skills-based, but we find that it's incredibly expensive to work with third parties, and it also takes a huge amount of our time, even though you're still paying for a third party. So I guess just want to understand, like, if you can tell us what partners you use, how much you're budgeting for that, and whether or not the business lines are contributing to that, or you're funding that completely from your budget.
Ooh, great questions.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I'll build on yours. We use the same partner, so.
Yes, and thank you for bringing us into reality with that question, because it is true. It's a huge, and that's what I often tell other companies looking. It is a huge investment. It is not as inexpensive. Although I will say a lot of nonprofits are really smart and saying, if you want to come in and volunteer, like, we need a donation to support company time. But for us, it's worth it because we see the value. What I will say is we have decided to centralize it all within our budget because we view it as a social impact driver. So we pay for it out of the foundation. I have worked with a couple different partners. I've worked with Taproot. I believe they're here today. They're fantastic. I loved working with them. We've worked with Common Impact, loved working with them. We've brought it all in-house. There was a time earlier in my career where we worked with Taproot on the program they designed to bring it all in-house to cut some of those costs, but it took a lot of time. And so we've found value in working with a partner who can keep a pulse on what all the companies are doing, the best-in-class models, the designs, be a thought partner with us. And to be honest, for us, it's just easier to have that funding than to fund a headcount for it on an ongoing basis. But it's a significant amount of investment. I would say, so something we also do is we really believe in providing general operating grants. Mm-hmm. So if a nonprofit, in general, but for skills-based volunteering as well. So if a nonprofit, it participates with us in a flash consulting event, we give a $5,000 general operating grant to account for their time, because it's a lot of time they're taking away for their day, and also to support with any deliverables that they implement. It's general operating, but sometimes we find that helps. All in, general operating grants, kind of support with the organization. I mean, I would say around 750,000 we're dedicating towards bringing the power and expertise of our people to our nonprofit partners. In the last 2 years, I believe, we've delivered over 2.5 million in social impact value for our organizations. And that's just based on hours. When we talk to organizations, we also ask, like, do you have an idea of what you would have paid a consulting organization for this? And oftentimes it's much larger than what we're estimating the hours. So we think it's worth it. Like I mentioned, a good chunk of that is in general operating dollars that supports all of our social impact. But it's not an inexpensive way to advance social impact, as many things aren't.
Yeah, I would echo everything you just shared. I guess to answer your one question, I technically put it in my budget, but I put a very small number and then I go ask the business for it. So I actually get the business to pay for it, and I kind of use it as a talent vehicle. And I share with them sort of, you were talking about Power BI, sharing with them all the numbers, like here are all your staff that participate. And one of the things we have been able to see, which is a happy coincidence, although maybe not really, a lot of the people participating are the ones that are then moving up in the organization. So there is an unintentional but pretty clear correlation between the more engaged they get in these different opportunities, how it helps their career. So it's an easy business case, but don't tell the business that I budgeted.
Do you want to continue with broad Q&A as opposed to moving into the, okay, let's keep going.
Yeah. I feel like the back of the room didn't get over here, but there's someone with their hand up. Yeah.
I have a question for Kim. You talked a few times about kind of your harder to reach associates, those who aren't at a laptop every day. You talked about it in terms of rolling out volunteer programs, but then you also talked about surveying. And when you talked about surveying, I was again thinking, how are you reaching those associates or employees with surveys? And you said that you've been thinking a lot about how to reach them, and we have the same problem because I work for Mars, and we have associates who are in manufacturing, and we have associates vets and vet techs who work in hospitals who either don't have a company computer or aren't at it most of the day. And so what are some tactics that you have used or explored on reaching those associates?
Absolutely. You probably, I had to step away from a breakout yesterday to have this very conversation. So really timely for us. So two things, I guess. So one of them is we do print stuff, right? It's not great. We know from a sustainability perspective, it's not the best way to go. But we put things on paper. We print posters. We make flyers. We send it to folks at all of our, what we call barns, our service locations where the field crews come in. We try to really go out. We've got, just 41 offices just in Illinois, and then for all of our other utilities in the DC, Baltimore, Philly, and Delaware area, we really do try to get teams to go out. We have teams called impact leaders. Everyone calls it a little different depending on the operating company, but those are individuals who go out and they get there at 6 in the morning when they do their morning safety huddle, and they pitch whatever we're trying to talk about. Usually that's for some of our programs to be engaged. We've been trying to leverage QR codes. They seem to be a little bit more inclined to use those, especially, again, the Gen Zs coming in. It can be a little harder with our older workforce. There's some mistrust there that we're still working through. It was put out there that maybe we do truly paper surveys. Our psychiatrist, our org effectiveness guy was like, and I'm like, well, if we have to, leverage a staff time, a junior staff member to literally type in these answers so that we can get them in, we're willing to do it. It's kind of anything we can do to get to them. It won't be perfect. The other thing we're doing, and it might be a little bit different, is many of our field employees are in different unions. They're all represented employees. So we are being very intentional at tying in their leadership to get their buy-in and demonstrate that this is, we offer these programs so that we can lift up what our employees already care about. And so it's really about the employees. So really trying to drive home that, and by extension, we're a utility, so we're in everyone's homes. So when our citizens do better, when our communities do better, it's good for us too. So some will argue, well, that's better for the business. It's like, no, it's better for everybody, right? We're trying to really solve the common good here. So it's very time consuming. I think the short answer to that is it's very time consuming, and you really have to map out. We have set dates where we go out to every single office, and when we can bring donuts or whatever, and we have a checklist, who's going where, when, and it's that intentional. So it sounds like you might be a little even more spread out based on the business, but
Shift meetings work in manufacturing.
yes. But it's hard to get everyone's attention, right? They care about safety incidents and what I have to do for my day. So it is hard to break in. So repetition. Yeah.
I'm coming.
How's it going? Steve from EY, Ernst & Young. 2 questions for you. I wanted to just dig in a little bit more on the definition of skills-based volunteerism. What exactly does it mean? Is it pro bono? And the reason I asked the question is at EY, we've had success with skills-based volunteerism, but also candidly, 2 things have happened. One is sometimes it actually becomes taxing on the NGO where we say, hey, we have to do skills-based volunteerism. And, you know, there will be an NGO, for example, works with veterans on serving food to veterans. And we'll go in and say, okay, but could we do a resume building workshop and job placement? And they'll be like, no, we just need you to serve veterans that are suffering from, like, you know, post-traumatic stress. So just what have you guys seen in around defining skills-based volunteerism? Do you see folks kind of pushing the needle on like, hey, is that or is that not really skills-based, and what effects it's having?
So I'll start and then I'll pass it over to you. So I think part of what I started with was we're struggling with it too because we're looking for also a global definition. So take just the U.S. out of it. Like we can't get a global definition at all because skills in Australia versus skills in the U.S. are very different. But we actually don't, when it comes to our partners, we kind of have a view of like we don't insist on it being skills because my background is I've been on the other side of this, and I'm like, I hate it when corporates come to me and they're like, we want you to create something for 20 of our people, so I won't do that. So we let them come to us with whatever they want. It just so happens our area of focus is around college and career success, so there are a lot of skills-based opportunities for our people naturally, but that's also why we have the other side of how we support our people, which is the dog walking, the making kits, and the other things that folks want to do. So that's kind of my short answer, but I think you have a lot to say on this one.
I think that was, I echo everything. I would say, in my opinion, we don't have a metric that says, like, we want this amount of skills-based volunteer opportunities. We want to center nonprofit needs. And so when we're meeting with our partners, we say, we openly say, don't design something specifically for us. What is a need that we can fill? So that I would say for, like, broad general volunteerism is, what do you need? And then oftentimes it's, have you already designed that program? Is that a program you want to design? Is that something we can fund and help support? If it's just designing for us, it's probably not worth their time and energy. And so just being very frank and honest that we want to center their needs is something that we often do. For our flash consulting or pro bono, so skills-based, we include like anything that you can think of that would use your specific skills and expertise. Our flash consulting, I would say, is like in between pro bono and skills-based and how we define that. It's using the skills, but it's to get to more of a pro bono outcome, just in a shorter period of time. For those, we publish those opportunities broadly within our grantee base, or even with some of our grantees, sub-grantees, and then it's an open application. So we don't go to a nonprofit and say, we want to do a flash consulting or pro bono project with you. We share it broadly and say, here's different ideas of what we could do. Bring us a challenge that you're facing, and we'll see if that we compare our people's expertise to help address it. So I'd say that's kind of our different approaches. If they really need hands-on volunteerism, that's more important than making it skills-based. And then for our programs that are really designed and led by us in Flash Consulting Pro Bono, those are offered broadly. And then we're looking at the survey results to see, is it actually meeting their needs?
Super, super helpful and comforting to know that you guys are facing some of the same issues. Can I just ask one more? Actually, it's about the Benevity slide that showed the increase in participation numbers. Does that include, if a firm just allows a certain amount of hours to employees and they could do it on their own time also, or is that like coordinated, sponsored by the institution?
It's all inclusive.
All inclusive, okay.
Thank you, Corey.
We haven't talked a lot about board service in anything that I've been in, so I'm curious if you all have and are intentional about engaging executives in board service, if you then align that strategically, and if there's any correlation between where you have board service among executives and participation rates of their employees.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'll start by just saying yes and yes. We do work with executives for board service, and it's often with organizations that align with our primary focus areas. Do we see an uptick on when executives are on boards with their teams? That I don't know. That's such a great question. And now I want to go dig in it. I'll be looking at that Power BI to figure it out.
Yes and yes here too. We work with an external partner to do board placement twice a year across the company. And we're actually just about to launch our junior board service because we've seen an uptick in junior staff coming saying, I want to get on board, I don't know how to, what do I do? So we originally were more focused, I wouldn't middle to senior level. We're now about to actually focus on junior staff as well to get them onto junior advisory boards and kind of build that pipeline. And for that, when we work with our external, it's whatever they want. Like we view board service as very personal, and so it has to be something that the individual cares about. That being said, for all of our grant partners, I personally try to engage a senior leader for what I shared earlier, just to have that continuity and sort of deeper company impact. To your question about does it mean anything to their teams? Officially, I would say no, but I do know that, like, you know, when their galas come around and they say, hey, I'm on the board, do you want to come? Like, people show up. And it has been a good way, actually, to engage staff. And I think, again, it's part of their own career development to some extent. Like, you're not obligated to attend at all. But you know what? If you want to sit next to your boss at an evening at a gala and get to chat a little bit, you know, a lot of folks might take advantage of that opportunity.
And I'll just add from my perspective, we do very similar. So we place executives, and we're just expanding to directors on boards aligned with our focus areas. So we are very aligned. We make sure they're personally passionate about it as well, trying to find that intersection because we all know that's really important. I would say one additional thing that we've been doing the last couple of years, though, is also seeing where it connects to their expertise. So when we're meeting with our partners, we ask, do you have any skill gaps? Do you have any things that you're missing from your board that we can help find a great fit? We run a skills and interest survey with our leaders. So if they're interested in board service, they fill out a form. And I now have a pool of like 100 executives and directors who are interested in board service. I know their interest areas. I know where that aligns with our focuses. I have a short bio, and I know their skills. And so then when I have a partner call and say, hey, I really could use a data scientist, we're launching a new data center, I'm able to kind of filter and sort, then have the conversation and see if it's a good fit. I would also say, like, the connections within your business, one of our pillars is advancing racial equity, and through workforce development specifically, so looking at our leaders in HR, in employment law, in technology, and identifying leaders where there's a strategic business value for both us as well as the organization. If an organization is looking for hiring, it's probably valuable for them to have an HR person on their board. So we ask that of the nonprofit and then work to pair it with where the intersection of expertise and passion with our leaders.
Hi, Cindy Sheehan with Citgo Petroleum. How have you, if any of you have dealt with encouraging or motivating contractors and or hourly employees? That's one of the areas where I think it's kind of a tricky situation because of HR guidelines and, you know, all of that. So I'm the president of our volunteer program in Houston at our corporate office. However, some of our remote locations have, you mentioned unions earlier, and so that was kind of helpful. But we also have contractors and hourly employees that maybe feel like they don't want to give you any more extra time of yes, it's a good cause, but how do you get them to feel like they can give of their time and they don't feel like it's giving to the company versus giving giving to the cause, and then do you capture those numbers in your reporting?
Okay.
You guys want
I can add, but I think you
We
have
have
the
very
most
few
relevant.
Okay, that's big.
Yeah.
So it's a great question. Currently, our contractors are not eligible to log anything into our system because by nature they're not on our HR file, so they don't make it into the system. One of the ways we work around that and try to make them feel engaged, and I'll talk about contractors first and then hourly employees just a little bit differently since they are eligible. With contractors, when we do well, first of all, they're welcome to join in any volunteer event, and we log them as family and friends. So someone can go in, and we do allow family and friend logging of hours. So we do count them in that way. And if we have fundraising events, we encourage them, if they just want to take part, we do encourage them to make a contribution directly to the organizations that we're supporting, if it's for a philanthropy side. And they will do that. Now, we can't match it or do anything like that, but at least they feel like they're a part of it. Or when if we do an auction, for example, for in promotion of something, they can participate, but again, so they can still get in and get something if they want, but it just isn't tracked in the same way. So their hours, volunteer hours are tracked, but fundraising, philanthropy is not. So if we enter them as friends and family. So that's contractors. Hourly employees are interesting because due to certain labor negotiations, they basically just have to have their manager's approval to go do a volunteer event. And if they have their manager's approval to do it, we don't have VTO across the board for any of our employees, but we do say, as long as you have your manager's support and from the union perspective, you give enough notice, they are allowed to go volunteer during work hours. And then off work hours, it's just like any of us, right? So that's really it. I'll add, though, that one thing that's been really helpful from the hourly perspective is that we have teams, we kind of have someone at each of our locations that serves as this impact leader or an advocate. They talk to the employees at the location, and we have found that a lot of our employees actually are involved in nonprofits. And so we have them come in with either their specific nonprofit or the nonprofit that they're organized with, and we encourage them to bring them in and share that information. Then oftentimes, if we're doing fundraisers for our workplace giving campaign, for example, or we do care days around the campaign, they'll partner with the employees' nonprofit, and that gets more engagement, especially if it's a field employee and the other field employees will fall in to support that person, and we've found that to be wildly successful. So, yeah. You're welcome.
Any more questions? Oh yeah, we've got 2 more. Okay,
I think 3.
Oh, 3? Okay. We've got 5 minutes left, so we don't want to get between you and lunch.
Christine with Macy's. I just had a suggestion based on skills-based, something that we're exploring that was kind of a workaround. Our focus is youth empowerment, so a big focus is mentorship. Number one, it's hard to get people to commit to being a mentor for a number of reasons. We're also dealing with supply chain facility stores, hourly colleagues. But what we did was we engaged iMentor, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with as a nonprofit. So we were able to grant them, and they're creating a program for us to roll out to select partners. So we're kind of pilot with them, but they were really excited to do it for us since they're the experts. I was challenged with create a mentor program, and I'm like, that's not really what I do. It's HR. But it was like this pressure to create it. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I have a lot of other things to do. So the idea of engaging a nonprofit and being able to financially include that as a grant, but have them do the work for us, and they're doing the entire program. So we'll source the mentors and mentees, but they even met with our partners to find out what the partners wanted. So they were a great partner. We're piloting it, so they're super excited. So that might be something that they offer go forward. And it's also a way to cover the financial aspect of it. But thank you for all your expertise. The hourly thing always gets tricky, and someone like Macy's with people clocking in, that's how we capture them to kind of tell them anything we want to tell them, because we have them for that minute when they're clocking in.
That's nice.
And rallies where, again, they're not paying attention. So
Exactly, that's true.
A little plug for iMentor, just really quickly. There, we also, just really quickly to piggyback on that. previously I worked for City's Philanthropic Foundation, and we used iMentor as well. They were just a fantastic partner. We had the exact same model, gave a grant. iMentor would come into the offices, sign everyone up, walk everyone through how to do it. They would set up designated times for you to go and get vetted. So because obviously you're dealing with students, so you need to get all the legal requirements behind that, which our legal team loved. So it made sure everything was like buttoned up. And they were, it gave customizability where you could have a 3-year program or a 1-year program. And it was really great. I actually volunteered and I found it really easy. And I did a 3-year program where it was with a junior in high school that you have through freshman year of college.
Wow.
And it was really, really great, and it's super impactful. And it's primarily LMI students who have a gap of about, right now with New York Public Schools, it's something like 500 students to 1 counselor. So this is something that's really impactful that you're able to help with. So yeah, just wanted to piggyback on that. Yeah, they're not nationwide. They're in Baltimore. They're definitely in New York. They're in DC. You're doing it virtual, even better.
Nonprofit partners and our people. So
Yeah.
we're not, like, it's our partners. So they're, it's like a really tailored program.
Yeah.
That's great. We'll take the last 2 questions.
Yeah, I also like iMentor. But just, I'm so intrigued. You mentioned family and friends volunteering. We do not log any of those hours. So I'm just curious how that works for you and how you fund it and handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. So family and friends aren't eligible for Dollars for Doers, but if we have a cleanup day and you bring your kid, you can sign your kid up and they can get a t-shirt. We do count hours separately. So when we say 52% of our employees take part in one of our programs, that doesn't count family and friends. Or when we say 35% of our employees volunteer, that does not count family and friends. We pay attention to the number, but we don't really record it when we talk about like what our employees do, but it's all done. Like if I'm signing my kid up, I have like a list of who my family and friends are, and I can add people depending on whatever the event is, and then they're always there, and I can just click the names on whoever's attending with me to something. Oh, there's waivers. Oh, there's waivers. Oh, legal's been involved. Yeah. Yes, they have to sign waivers, absolutely, or on behalf of minors. Yes, there is a waiver.
Awesome. We'll take the last question, I think.
Well, thank you so much. I'll keep it quick. Last question. I was glad to hear that the conversation steered toward students and mentorship, and I'm with Verizon, and one thing that we recently started is through our nonprofit partners, really getting some of that feedback directly from the students on how the volunteer engagement is going. However, we have a lot of different partners, so sometimes that data looks different, organization to organization. So on the topic of measurement, I just wanted to ask the panel and also maybe audience here of any best practices you have on collecting some of that survey data directly from those participating in the volunteer programs.
So I can talk a little bit. I don't think we have it figured out, so I can talk about the process. So we measure our run programs, like our branded programs, in a very specific way. We're now starting to do some other programs outside of that, and depending on how much we're funding, how much support we're providing, we sometimes say, can you ask these 2 to 3 questions on your survey if it's not cumbersome? Once again, if we're funding them, we ask that. I will say though, just from our social impact portfolio, this is a question we're looking at. How can we cut down on the requirements for our grant making, our reporting? We're engaging an external vendor to help kind of look across that. We ask our partners, what do you collect, and find the common denominator. So it is a work in progress for us. But I will say for our volunteer programs, our nonprofit leadership programs, where we're funding programs that we aren't running, but we're the main funder for it, we just ask them, what are the 2 to 3 most important things that we want to measure, and see if they can add it to their surveys.
We follow very similar to what you were talking about. We try to survey after everything as best we can. If it's run by us, obviously we have much more immediate control over it, and it's immediate. Like you can't walk out the door until you've completed it. And we sometimes use paper, even though I don't like to. But then if our partners are running it, they often tend to have as their own best practice survey. So similarly, we just work with them to see. I mean, a lot of the students, quite frankly, just because of the relationships they form with our people, we get unsolicited feedback quite a bit, which is great. You know, like I think they're, you know, it's a different generation. They're very open about how they felt about something, what worked, what didn't. So that's sometimes the best feedback, but there's no science to that one.
And ditto for us for everything they just said. Yeah, it's unasked for feedback that we get immediately, and for more of our setup programs for the mentoring and the STEM academies, we do send surveys, but we're relying on the feedback that they're willing to give. Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for all the questions and engagement. It was great. I mean, these three leaders are incredible. I think we should just give them a hand because they have truly, thank you for pulling back the curtain on some of these things, right? Because tactically, it's hard. Strategically, we all get it, but tactically, it's hard. I just threw up the slide there if you're interested in more data on the state of corporate volunteering. This was just launched in February, so pretty fresh. And thank you again.